there's going to be questions from the community about the budget.
Right away.
Okay, we're a meeting of the Woodby Health Hospital District. We're going to have a budget meeting. We're going to go over our budget for this year, coming up next year. This is a preliminary draft, and there is possibilities that we may come up with revisions and changes. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul at this time, and he's going to brief us on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Gover, and welcome. I have for your review a number of slides. Beginning with this first one, it is a collection of assumptions I utilized in developing our budget for 2025. I'll point out some of the highlights. First being a planned price increase of 5% on January 1. And this is consistent with years past and consistent with the industry in general. We are budgeting some PET-CT services that are going to be implemented in Q4 of 2024. Clinics growth expansion. We underwent the Expanse migration, and there were slowdowns in workflows, and some general improvements that'll come about through this conversion to Expanse. We do anticipate an OR closure for maybe as many as 6 weeks during the month, and we've forecasted reductions in inpatient and outpatient surgeries related to that closure. There's an EMS station addition, which is going to provide an increase in revenues and an increase in costs. On the other operating revenue side, you benefit from $3.3 million in increased levies, EMS operations. We've got wage increases of about 2% on average. We're going to have a focus on replacing at least 20% of our contract labor with employed staff, which is going to help us with our staffing costs.
Quick question. Go back to the EMS levy. I've written down this question. It says increase 3 point. Is that increase to 3.3 million or?
It's an increase of,
Okay.
yeah, 6 million to 9 million plus. There's some incremental costs that come with the revenues associated with the EMS station and the clinic's growth and expansion. Inflation, 4%. This would be inflation on supplies, purchase services, leases and rentals, those kinds of things.
Is that just, that's just a classic increase that you're expecting?
Mhm.
Not anything due to the new election?
No,
Okay.
no. We will see an increase in our medical and dental insurance expense for employees,
That's what percentage?
about $250,000.
Percentage.
Yeah.
That's been levied on us. Right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it'd just be good to know what.
I'm thinking something in the 2.5% range. We want to get an employee appreciation program underway. It's going to cost us a little bit of money, but provide benefits in the long run in terms of employee satisfaction and morale and things of that nature. Depreciation on acquired assets is gonna impact us to the tune of almost $500,000 in added costs next year. IV pumps replacement. Normally, the equipment of this cost would be capitalized. However, the per unit cost of 98 IV pumps is below the line for categorization as capital equipment. So this will be an expense that we incur next year as we replace those IV pumps. The operating expenses will be reduced somewhat with the OR closure. The decrease in revenues will obviously be greater than the decrease in expenses. So that's going to be an overall hit to our net surplus budget for next year. On the non-operating revenue and expense side, we've got levy increases of 1% that are legislated. Bond interest expense will be lower due to principal reductions, and we will be receiving an FDA grant of approximately $2.5 million for the purchase of a $3.8 million air conditioning system to cool our OR. This is the reason for the shutdown of our OR next year.
I'll ask you one quick question, just because I didn't do it way back in the beginning.
Yeah.
The price increases of 5% across the board,
Mhm.
given payer behavior, what does that actually look like? I mean, if we raise the prices, do
Yeah.
we actually get 5% across the board?
Great question. Yes, and we're gonna see that in just a minute. I'm gonna go through many of those items, plus a couple more, and give you dollar figures associated with each of these things.
Nathan texted me that he has very little service, but if we have any questions for him, I can get text, but can't make calls right now. I can text some questions if we have any for him.
Thanks, John.
Just like that.
Hey, John, why am I unable to advance this?
Let's do it from there.
You should be able to do it.
Okay, so we start with, this is what I call a bridge, and the items, each of those individual items in between the 2024 forecasted surplus and at the bottom of the 2025 budget surplus are those items that will bridge the 2024 forecast to the 2025 budget. Starting with inflation, $1.817 million is the budgeted increase in cost associated with inflation, which doesn't include inflationary measures on any salaries and wages. That's going to be a separate item. Our 2024 forecast includes distressed hospital grants of $1,577,000 that we received in 2024 that I've backed out because we don't know that we're going to get those next year, right? So these numbers off to the far right here are the effect that each of these items have on our net surplus, with the negatives being a reduction in net surplus and positives adding to the surplus. Okay. Labor unions are going to negotiated increases are going to cost us approximately $979,000 in added costs next year. The OR closure is going to reduce our our net surplus, budgeted net surplus and actual net surplus by approximately $728,000. And the list goes on and on. You asked a question about how was
The 5% increase across the board.
yeah,
How would it be?
How does it-
yeah, thank you. Okay, so this item near the bottom. I didn't mean to do that. 5% increase, 1,125. Okay, so the net of that 5% increase is only gonna be budgeted at an increase of $442,000. The dollars increase in charges is gonna be something closer to $16 million. So we're gonna reap a very small amount of money from that 5% increase. But
Wow.
but we do have a few contracts that pay a percentage of charges, and that's where we benefit from a price increase. That's the only place we benefit from a price increase, is where we have contracts that pay us on a percentage of charges. The other contracts pay on basically a fee schedule. Doesn't matter what you charge, you're gonna get what the amount on the fee schedule is, right? But, like I said, 5% price increase is consistent with what happens in the industry. It's consistent with what's happened here in past years, and it's needed.
So when you look at the EMS levy, that was somewhat targeted over time for new ambulances, right? New equipment, that was part of the ask for it.
I would say that the EMS level, the EMS operations operate in the negative. And I would argue that a good portion of that increase is needed simply to fund ongoing operations.
For the next period of time.
Yeah.
3 years, 5 years, whatever that levy was for, right?
Right.
Okay.
But we will get that. We'll get that $3 million increase one time, but it'll continue at that rate
Right.
into perpetuity until it's looked at again. So we'll benefit year over year, but it won't be a $3 million increase every year. If that makes sense.
Correct.
It's not designated, not gonna be designated for capital expenditures for
Yeah.
ambulance.
Yeah.
What is it, the term interface? Maybe you said it's interfaces? What's that?
Yes, so that's an IT term. Interfaces allow software that's unrelated to this software to speak to this software. The contract labor replacement is going to help us reduce our expenses by about $300,000 if we're able to convert just 20% of our contract labor, travelers and whatnot, from the contract labor ranks to being employed. Okay, so those 22 items bring us from a forecasted 2024 surplus 1.501385 up to a budgeted surplus for next year of $1,724,573. So on this next page, this is a report in the form that we're more familiar with: revenues, discounts, other operating revenue, total operating revenue, with those bridge items, those 22 bridge items expressed in the column in the middle, initiatives 2025. So each of those 22 initiatives is going to have, in most cases, both a revenue, a discount and allowances, bad debt, revenue deductions, in some cases, other operating revenues, and increases or decreases in costs. So,
Question.
yes, sir.
So you're saying we're looking at about, what, $22 million more patient revenue income this year?
Yes.
Okay, considering the fact that we put on 40 some new providers, doesn't that seem a little thin to you?
A little thin.
Yes.
Well, those providers have been here for much of this year. So there may be some revenue to be gained from that. That was absent in 2024 that I'm not recognizing here in 2025. So I would say that the forecasted or budgeted revenue for 2025 is conservative for that. Let's go through each of, before I do that. So what you've got here is your forecast for 2024, $1,501,000, $223,000 in favorable initiatives, and your $1,724,573 for your 2025 budgeted numbers. And I'm thinking this next slide. Okay, so let me back up. Go ahead with your question again, Mr. Goldberg.
Well, it seems like all the medical people that we put on, for example, oncology, it seems to me like our patient revenues should be quite a bit higher, considering that we have 40 to 50 more people working toward revenues
Right,
than what we had last year. And most of them have just been showing up in the last couple of months.
right. Well, I didn't budget an increase in revenues for those positions because I was looking at it like they've been here for most of this year. And anything that we gain on our budget from them doing more than they did in 2024 will be on top of what we're showing here. I'm trying to show a worst case scenario instead of a best case scenario.
Is it possible you already ameliorated it or integrated it in 2024 as they came in? Where that's why it isn't a huge change from
Yeah,
24 to 25?
thank you. Anything that they did in 2024 is already is already in your starting number. Right here.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
That's why it's not as shocking.
yeah, it's, does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. So while all this revenue that they generated in 2024 is showing up here, that same revenue is in this number. Because this is an add-on to that.
If it's set up there, 1/1/24 at the top, it'd be one thing, but it's really 12/31/24.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to utilization statistics. I apologize for the missing header, but these initiatives are going to generate incremental admissions, incremental patient days, 2,077 outpatient visits, increased ER visits.
What are the two? Can you just what should we write down? So we've got hospital as a header. What's the header over the 1173?
Yeah, those are your initiatives for 2025.
Okay.
Those are increased.
And then what's the next number? The
Yeah,
number.
that's your budget. So while 5,000,
Hold on.
yeah, sure.
I think we're this one. So the line that starts with 4, what's the header on that line? The one on the far right's budget.
Initiatives.
This one's 2024 forecast.
Okay.
This is initiative.
Okay.
This is the budget. Just the sum
Got
of those first two columns. Okay, and the 5,000 increased visits in the clinics was kind of scary to me. It seemed like a big number. But you look at those numbers, walk-in Vocarbra, 1,265 visits. That's only 5 or 6 visits a day, right? That's very doable. This is like a 2.5% increase in patient volumes in each of those clinics.
And you don't have oncology here at all. That's your
Oncology is part of the surgical care
Yeah.
clinic,
Part of the MAC.
or, yeah, part of the MAC, thanks.
Part of the MAC. But MAC is mostly considered outpatient treatments, right? Why did you roll in a provider into a MAC?
Because they're outpatient treatments
The treatments are, but the.
For the-
so is
for the oncology,
I see. It just.
right, Dr. Mill?
Yeah, it's just another outpatient clinic. It's a hospital-based clinic. It's
It's just a new specialty care a new specialty provider that is, high cost provider. And so it's just interesting not to see it as like orthopedics is a high revenue
Mhm.
as well. So it's just interesting that oncology isn't broken out so we can see what oncology, budgeted versus what they do at the end.
That's
Right.
probably,
Because
that's
it's a
probably
new
something for
provider.
us to discuss at the finance meeting, because
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
point that she's bringing up is a really good one. In other words, if we already have urology care, Dr. Miller, and we have orthopedic care broken out, would you not think we should have, now that we have a full-blown oncology effort with an oncologist, should that not be a separate line item?
Sure.
I would think we want to track that.
we're able to track those visits, right?
Yeah, absolutely, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in fact, with Expanse, it's even easier because
Yeah. Otherwise, you couldn't put it in this
the
total.
providers operate
Yeah.
out of the ambulatory module and the infusions are done through the acute module. So yeah, it's very easy to track.
Okay.
I think
All the numbers in the clinics, does that presuppose that we have the capacity for that?
Yeah.
That we can actually see them?
We have capacity through that.
And that makes perfect sense because surgical care, women's care, urology care, that's all the outpatient revenue that's generated in the clinics. Then, of course, the downstream revenue is done on the hospital side. We see that in surgeries and admissions and visit and days of service and things like that. And in the MAC, you could easily split that out and just have oncology with the outpatient service line there. And then the infusions can be a separate line item because it's separate from inpatient and it is a high dollar area that you want to keep an eye on. It would make good sense to have two lines there,
Mhm.
the oncology and then the infusion sector. It's not inpatient, so it wouldn't show. anywhere else.
Ordinarily, you would include medical oncology infusions with oncology as part of that service line. If I'm, an oncologist will see a patient. That patient will then come in under a treatment plan. Those infusions should be included with the oncologist's cost and profit centers.
I think from a commissioner standpoint, one of the most important things for us is where are we making money and where are we not making money given our department? In other words, something that we don't have to do. And we're losing money on that unit.
Right,
And we have a decision to make. Why? do
sure,
that?
sure.
By the same token, there's going to be areas, women's care, for example, where we've got a community-based
Right,
charter.
Yeah.
And yes, we're going to be accepting some loss of money. We see how much we are and then where are we making up for it.
right.
That's helpful.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it's helpful to leadership as we as we plan, you know, to increase or decrease services in certain areas.
Absolutely.
I think what you're describing, more than necessarily increasing or decreasing some of our services that we know that we spend money on, is how to, best calculate community benefit and articulate that
Mhm.
with a number.
Right.
Yeah,
So what you described is a great way to put a number to the community benefit being
Mhm.
provided by the hospital.
And the flip side of that is true from a community communications standpoint. They should know that
Mhm.
we are doing for them, the
Right.
hospital's doing what we can to compensate for a loss so that we do have that service,
right,
whatever it might be.
right.
And providing healthcare equity
Yeah,
for a rural health system that we are still providing as many services as possible as you would have over on the mainland. So we're
Mhm.
providing equitable care for everyone in the community as much as we can.
The emergency department is a good classic example. If we're operating at a loss for the
Mhm.
entire emergency department, that's tough.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to, that's what critical access hospitals
Exactly.
do in rural
Mhm.
hospitals. So that's good,
Mhm.
not bad. But we need that data. I mean, that's the selling point.
for sure, yeah. Okay. Capital budget. A lot of items here, some more expensive than other. I wouldn't necessarily call this a wish list. These are truly needs. I'm confident that we can purchase $5,570,000 worth of capital next year. And grow our days cash on hand.
So where is this in the budget? In other words, that 5.5 million,
Yeah.
where's that?
So in the budget, it's going to be, each of those items have a useful life, okay? And it'll be depreciated over that useful life. So I had an item in, one of the 22 items was depreciation on new equipment. I think it was $467,000 in added depreciation costs.
It was 708,000.
Yeah,
Appreciation.
It's towards the top,
The assets. New
Yeah.
assets.
under foreclosure.
yeah, right below, yeah, depreciation and amortization on new assets. So that $565,000 will be a charge next year and the year that follows. So sadly,
So it's not all falling in one
sadly,
year.
Medicare pays us for our costs, right? $8 million in assets that we pay cash for today, we're not gonna recoup from Medicare until those assets are fully depreciated. So, it's a charge to our working capital to fund something like that, because we don't get that money back from Medicare, like I said, until that asset is fully depreciated.
I could definitely say that replacing the Libby Health phone system
Mhm.
is a direct return on investment for
Mhm.
patient access.
And March is
And-
way too late to do it.
And
Next week will be better.
we would definitely see return on investment on
Yeah.
that, probably almost immediately, in how easily people can access care. And what's the population health system?
I was gonna ask that.
Yeah.
So,
We can take that one if you want.
please,
It's,
yeah,
it's an add-on module to Expanse that allows us to track population health among our patients, which means tracking closing care gaps. And making sure everyone gets their screening for colorectal cancer and their mammograms and their diabetes management. And
So it's a reminder kind of a system?
no, it's a data repository. It does that too. It collects all the data on our patients with regard to these measures. and allows us to send reminders to them as a group if they need something, and allows us to report it to our payers, who then like this data because then they can incentivize us to do well on this, because they in turn are incentivized by CMS to do well on this. So it's going to be very, very useful to us to maintain quality of patient care.
So it's part of the ACO.
Well, this ACO wants to see this data.
The ACO wants to see this data, and what percentage of our population falls in the ACO?
There are 3,000 covered lives in our ACO right now. They're traditional Medicare patients only. They're managed Medicare, which comprises about half of our patients. Medicare patients are managed care right now.
I think that's about to change pretty big time. I think Advantage plans are going to take a big hit. They're very,
They're getting a lot of bad press, and the
It's right.
CMS is starting to look at them because their gatekeeping policies have gotten very strict in their attempt to maximize profit. And they're being put under the spotlight by CMS. I don't know if we'll see any significant changes.
I think there's some payers, at least in other parts of the country, that are dropping them.
Premera has just dropped their MA plan in Washington State.
Yeah.
So Premera will no longer be participating. The others are still in it for now.
So that 1.3 million, will it be able to increase our revenues?
Potentially, yes, because the better we can report our quality data, the more revenue we can receive from the various payers.
Well, it's only for 3,000 of our impoundment, is about what you said,
The software is for all our patients,
for all our
but
patients,
the
but
ACO is,
for 3,000.
yes, but this software is for every one of our patients, allows us to report quality data to anybody.
But we don't get any more money, don't know about patients, just for the ones.
Almost all of our payers are incentivizing pay for performance, value-based purchasing. All our major payers are doing that, and we have contracts with them, with most of the major players. So Kaiser, Premera, the managed Medicaid plans.
All those 40-year-olds that get colonoscopies and all those. Yeah, there's a lot of.
Yeah, it's really an essential add-on to the Experience software that allows us to move forward in the new era of pay for performance rather than just pay for volume.
Is the 1.3 million a one-time fee?
Yes.
And does it have a tail to it? And it's obviously Expanse, for example, the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
What about this?
Can you speak to that?
I cannot speak to the cost, ongoing cost, other than the maintenance costs that we pay
Yes.
for Expanse.
Because that would be very helpful as well to have a column that does or does not include follow one or a
Mhm.
table, because that's going to impact on the next year and follow one budget, as opposed to thinking we just wrote a check for 1.4 million and we're done.
Right, right.
You know, same thing for the phone system. What does that get us?
Mhm.
Is that a software upgrade, or is that for actual phones?
I think it's, oh, yeah, it's a system.
Yeah, our current phone system is going
I
to,
mean, $1 million is a lot of money. We get
Yeah.
used to not thinking that way, but $1 million, you know, that's a chunk of change.
yeah, I believe it's for both hardware and software.
Yeah, and that extends to our clinic settings too.
Right. Yeah.
Tim would know the answer. to
Yeah, Tim,
this.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
but our current system is about to be.
So, Paul,
Yes, sir.
we're planning on remodeling our OR this year, January, February.
ED. ED.
No, I'm sorry, yeah, ED. I don't see it on here.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was on.
your facelift
Where is it?
That's halfway
in
down.
engineering, about halfway down.
All right, yeah, okay, so we're looking at $900,000.
Yeah.
So we have $600,000 coming due in the note, which is gonna cover a portion of that.
Mhm.
Which means that we're gonna be kicking in about $300,000 above what we have coming in.
Right.
How much of that will we be using for depreciation expenses? Can we use it for depreciation expenses
Yes.
of the 900,000?
Yes.
And how much of that will we get back from Medicare?
Well, you get back that portion of that cost that Medicare services for our population. Let's say Medicare utilization is 50% of total. We would get back from Medicare roughly 101% of 50% of that total cost as it's depreciated out over time.
So we're taking out 900, we're gonna get 400,000 back, and how much depreciation will we be able to utilize? We're gonna take it on a 10-year period, a 3-year period? How long?
Yeah, phone system, I think I depreciated that over 10 years.
So
As for a useful life.
ED was
So
10
really
years, right?
$90,000 a year depreciation.
Mhm. So you might get back $45,000
Yeah.
a year in depreciation costs.
What's nurse call? Other than, hey, nurse, what's nurse call?
Yeah.
I think it's a,
What is it?
The button like that.
right, it's a nurse call system, I believe.
Oh,
And
Yeah.
you need a new one of those?
That's what they tell me.
The only reason I ask is because that building was just built not that long ago.
So
So
it's
just
a
surprising
software,
that they
it's a
didn't-
software, it's not. the
having a
actual
call
building.
system
we're in
that works.
software hell.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, the OR handler absolutely has to happen. Otherwise, we're shutting down our OR.
Don't we have some grants for that?
We're getting $2.5 million
Okay.
in FDA grants to offset that.
Huge thing.
Yeah. I think that's the last of my presentation slides. I'm happy to go back to any that I've presented and answer additional questions.
Now, do you have any questions from the public?
No.
Okay. Do you want to vote on this?
I don't think we need to vote on this.
I think he just has to.
Right.
Well, it's gonna go to the finance committee and then it's gonna go to the full board.
Right, today's meeting is just that we have to have this presentation.
Tim just texted me. He said the nurse call is for the old part of the building. The older part, which is the emergency room and the DI. And the MAC area.
Okay.
That's where.
That makes more sense to me. Makes much more sense. Great.
And of course, we're gonna have things come up of a capital nature that need to be replaced.
Why not? We're not allowing that next year. So the only question I have, and perhaps it would appear that we're gonna lose potential for 175 outpatient surgeries. Is there any capacity or any relationship that would allow us to do some of those somewhere else? Ireland, for example.
So hopefully we can postpone some of them, either get them done before or after. I think it's just 3 weeks we're planning to shut down.
So Paul's, no, I think it's 6 weeks.
Paul's putting together for budget purposes, as transparent, worst case scenario. Dr. Miller and his team and the rest of the team are paraphrasing, don't want to put words in your mouth, going to do their honest best to do as many cases here. And so there's going to be an effort to do better than what Paul's put in there, but he doesn't want to show you less than what he needs to provision for.
Yeah, I think the vast majority of elective cases will be postponed. The emergency cases, they will go to places like Ireland, scheduling.
It'd be interesting to, we definitely need to know the time frame.
It's in our
shutdown, whether it's 3 weeks or 6 weeks.
We don't
Yeah,
know
we'll hear about that out in public,
what's gonna happen.
and so we'll have to get Tim in to tell us exactly
Yeah.
how long he's anticipating it to be shut down.
I mean, just from a,
Many
just from a
elements.
community relations and communication standpoint,
Yeah.
that there needs to be routine pre-announcements, you know, and the same thing for the ED, you know, and taking advantage of it, you know. You talked, we listen. We're spiffing up the ED and here's what we're doing, but if that just goes without being in the paper and marketing, it's gonna be a real shame.
multiple times.
Yeah, we're.
Yeah, maybe even a ribbon cutting or something like that.
Well, because they, I mean, they complain at the drop of the hat, you know, that there's, you know, a piece of lint on the floor. And so it's important for them to see that it was taken very seriously, the condition of the ED. So, yeah,
Kim is estimating 3 weeks.
okay, good.
Yeah, there again, I mean, that notice needs to be on the front doors, everything. All of us need to know exactly when it's gonna be.
Right.
Right here about it. Somebody comes in with a bad back.
Yeah, that would not be good.
Any more
Well, Paul,
questions?
as always, great job with the numbers. I mean, I don't know, you just pull them out of your ear, don't you? And you just put those things in there. You're so convincing. We're buying it.
It's all based on hard facts
Yeah.
Any more questions for Paul?
Well, I
and
appreciate,
assumptions.
I appreciate that there's a capital budget, because I'm not sure there's been one in a while. So it's very nice to see it black and white, what the
Very-
forecast is.
It's a big deal.
That's a credit to our managers who work with this stuff every day and they know what their needs are.
It's great.
Without objections, we will stand adjourned.
Nope, that's it.
We're not talking about this.
It was just.
Kate,